A symbolic neighborhood in Nicaragua came under siege Tuesday by pro-government forces. The National Police advanced into the city of Masaya's Managua neighborhood, which in recent months has become a center of opposition to Nicaragua's President Daniel Ortega. In mid-April, a wave of anti-government protests started against cuts to the Social Security system. Since then, more than 200 people have been killed by pro-government forces. And joining me now on the phone from the Nicaraguan capital of Managua is Univision correspondent Tifani Roberts. Tiffany?
Hi, DeMarco. Good evening.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, sure. My pleasure. Today was a really busy day for us here in Managua because we couldn't get through to Masaya. At 6 a.m. local time, we heard of the attacks, and we were talking with people on the phone. You couldn't even hear their voices over the gunfire. It was it was very dramatic, and we couldn't get through. There was a few of us journalists that tried to get there. The police and the paramilitaries had cordoned off they had a whole perimeter around the city, didn't allow any traffic, no public transportation, let alone journalists. So all the information we had basically was through social media and through the contacts that we had made through the week that we've been visiting the city.
So, Tiffany, tell us historically, why is the city so symbolic and important to the people of Nicaragua?
Well, first of all, it's very close to Managua. It's 13 miles. And if you come to Nicaragua and you want to buy a hammock or any, pottery, whatever, you go to Masaya. Masaya has been symbolically, it's the arts and crafts and it's like the capital of the folklore of Nicaragua. And because of that, most of their inhabitants are very, they have a very old history with tribes, and some of them are indigenous, and they're rebellious by nature. So when the Sandinistas had their revolution 30-some years ago, they won the revolution because of Masaya. They were the first city to rise up in support of the Sandinistas, and they helped, overthrow the dictator. So Masaya was traditionally a very strong foothold for the Sandinistas until April 18th, until the last 3 months, and then they turned their back on Ortega, and all of a sudden Ortega doesn't have Masaya anymore. And that was a shock for a lot of the country.
We've been looking at the pictures for quite some time now. In fact, Thursday marks 3 months since the start of protests against the Ortega government. What has President Ortega's response been to this latest wave of violence, and how has he been able to maintain power there?
Well, you have to understand the violence comes from him. Most of the uprising has been through barricades. Originally, what happened was that the protesters would, they would take over the streets, and they would put up certain barricades to stop the police from coming in. So it started like a defense mechanism. We don't want the police in our neighborhood, so we would put up the barricades. That's what the neighbors would tell us. And with the help of the students, who are, always by nature, the students are the rebellious ones. But the neighbors had a lot of support. And then, what happened was all of a sudden we started seeing paramilitaries that were being escorted by police. And it became exponentially very violent. And it's gotten to the point where it's lawlessness. But it comes from these forces that have just formed in the last 2-3 months, and they're just brutal. So just by mere, trying to, shoot fear into the population, he has been able to sort of regain control of the streets. But I don't know. I mean, the environment seems like it's going to come back. I mean, people are just so mad, and they don't like it. You got to think every 4 hours, there's so many deaths here that if you do the math, every 4 hours somebody's being killed in Nicaragua, and that's just unheard of.
Yeah, that's tough to hear as well. We do want to point out that both the United States and the UN have condemned the violence in Nicaragua. The U.S. has also imposed visa restrictions on certain officials. Do people in Nicaragua want the global community to take a firmer stance on this issue?
Of course. They've been very slow in reacting, and I'm talking mostly the OAS and the UN. There's been some international human rights organizations that are, they have boots on the ground here. And the reports that they're coming out and everything that they're looking at, the reports they have are very damaging to the Ortega government, but it doesn't seem to matter to them. And the population the people here are just so frustrated that everybody seems to agree that, human rights are being violated and people are being killed and tortured, but nothing's really happening. So it's one of those things where nobody really knows what to do. The U.S. has done some, but a lot of people here want them to do more.
Tifani, a final question for you. Is there a possibility of a civil war in the near future? Do you think that's going to happen?
I don't think so. The opposition to Ortega has been adamant of being peaceful. They, even in Masaya today, which you would think if any guns would have come out and it would have been gunfight, it would have been in Masaya because they're, by nature rebels. But no, they retreated. I think there were 1-2 deaths. And now what they do, everybody, all the arrests. But for a civil war, you would need to have guns on both sides. And so far, the government is the only one that has the guns.
All right, Tifani, I know it's a tough assignment, but you're doing a terrific job reporting and just keeping the people there informed as well as everyone across the entire world. Thank you so much for joining us.